So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions talk. It's been a long while since we have done a live stream just talking about the Detroit Lions. I don't really have a ton of plans for today necessarily. I just kind of wanted to get on, talk some Lions football with some of you guys, and just get back into, kind of the flow of the season as we kind of near training camp and the NFL regular season. So One Pride 40 is the first member in the building today. As always, one of the longtime supporters of the channel. He does have a question early. He says, any possible trap games for the Detroit Lions to worry about? And I think that, the Lions have a very up and down schedule next season. The Lions have, I'd say, some pretty tough games early, but I think kind of later in the season, their schedule gets a little bit easier with people like the Giants, the Bears, the Jaguars, the Jets, and the Panthers. As far as those games, I do think that it is possible that the Jets are going to be a trap game. The Jets are a team that I think are kind of on par with the Detroit Lions a little bit. They're a team that's kind of going side by side on a rebuild with the Detroit Lions. And last year, again, they finished a half win ahead of Detroit, and they finished, I believe, 1 or 2 picks ahead of Detroit in the NFL draft. They're a team that is kind of in a similar boat, kind of has a lot of good quality pieces, but also has some things to work on and has some holes on their roster. And I think, right in the middle of the season, I think the Lions will be coming off maybe a win or two, right? A win versus Jacksonville at home, a big division win versus Minnesota at home. They're going to go in New York in December versus a really tough team that I think is going to be hard to beat for a lot of teams. And I think the record of the Jets might not be what maybe would be equivalent to the Lions. I think the Jets might have more losses because their schedule early on is very, very difficult. But I think they're going to be kind of like the Lions of last year, where they might not be the best team win-wise, but they're going to be that team that's going to knock out a playoff contender. They're going to be that team that never gives up without a fight. And they're going to be that team that just sticks around and continues to make the opponent's life very, very difficult. So I think the Jets is the Lions trap game for this year. It's just kind of at that weird time. It's in New York. It's in December. It's after a couple home wins. I think that's going to be the Detroit Lions trap game, but that's the game that I see the Lions maybe not performing at their best. Let's see. Yeah, One Pride 40 says way easier than last year. Absolutely. How's school going? School's going really good. Go back in just under a month. Kind of excited to go back, but kind of sad to go back as well. It's got some ups and downs for sure. Dr. Paparoni says, what is your thoughts on Jared Davis coming back? I think he's great. I think it's a good signing. I think the Lions certainly needed some linebacker help, right? You go to their depth chart. Let's see if I can pull it up here for just a second. But, you go to their depth chart and you kind of look at just what they had to work with last season at the linebacker position. And it wasn't really a whole lot, right? I mean, you go to their linebackers, and it's not a super talented group, at least on paper. It's not a super talented group, right? You have Alex Anzalone, you have Chris Board, and you really had Sean Deion Hamilton and Derek Barnes going into the offseason. Linebackers that on a lot of teams would be linebacker 2, linebacker 3, not a whole lot of linebacker 1s on the roster, and I don't quite think that's exactly what Jared Davis is going to be. But I think at the very worst, Jared Davis would be a good special teams contributor. I think at the very worst, he is somebody that is going to come in, is going to work hard, could be a pretty good early run stuffer for the Detroit Lions, right, would finally be in a system that helped play to his strengths that wasn't under Matt Patricia. I think it was a good pickup. It was super cheap. It was 1 year, low risk, high reward, former first round pick. I think, he could be the Charles Harris of this year. I think he could be that guy that, former first round pick, hasn't really found his stride in the NFL yet, hasn't really, gotten to play at a super high level, but he comes in under a pretty good coaching staff in Detroit, comes in under the linebacker coach in Detroit, Kelvin Shepard, who is, a very, very good linebackers coach, got some good production out of Derek Barnes a year ago and got some solid production out of less than superstar linebackers this season ago. So I think he's a good pickup, good depth. He's going to be a good competitor. I don't actually think he's even on the depth chart right here, which seems kind of weird to me. He's actually not on this depth chart, which is strange, but he is a member of the Detroit Lions. I think it was a good pickup, low reward or low risk, high reward, right? If he comes in and plays like the former first round pick that the Lions drafted him to be, then you got a former first round pick that's playing like a first round pick for $4 million. And if he becomes a special teamer, if he becomes a backup or even just a role player in the defense, that's still cheap money. That's still cheap production for a player with some relatively high upside. What's your opinion on the last two draft classes? I think they've done a very good job. I think they've kind of reset where the Detroit Lions were, right? Where I feel like Bob Quinn was always trying to kind of fill the most immediate hole without kind of looking at the overarching problem, if that makes sense, right? I feel like Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia was like, oh, we lost Darius Slay. Well, let's draft a cornerback at number 2 or at number 3, even though that might not be the biggest need or the most impactful position, right? Okay, if it was last year, they would have likely gone with Devontae Smith at 7, right? Okay, yeah, the offensive line needs to be shored up. We do need that right tackle. But, Devontae Smith, we just lost Kenny Golladay. Let's plug that guy back in and keep moving forward. Whereas I feel like Brad Holmes kind of took a step back and said, okay, this strategy of just plugging in rookies for veterans isn't really working because the Lions don't have a good enough surrounding core to do that. And I think that he kind of reset it. He kind of stepped back and said, okay, let's look at it as a whole. I don't care that we lost Kenny Golladay. I don't care that we lost, Trey Flowers this offseason. I don't care that we lost, player X, Y, and Z. What is our biggest need and who is the best player on the board? And I think that's how they've been approaching the last two drafts. And I think that's what's been allowing them to net players like, Aiden Hutchinson, like Penei Sewell, even Amon-Ra St. Brown in the late rounds, right? They've been getting value at every single pick. And for a team that was really, really lacking of talent almost anywhere on the roster after the Quinn Tricia era, I think that was the right thing for the general manager and head coach to look at. Payo Time's in the building. What's up, Payo Time? We did a live stream yesterday going over every single game of the Detroit Lions schedule, game by game, including a couple hot takes in the middle during the bye week. If you haven't seen that, if you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. It was a lot of fun, a lot of good people, a lot of good questions, and you will get to see my most recent record prediction for the Lions. But I'm glad he's in the building today. Dr. Paparoni says, I think the linebackers will surprise a lot of fans. I think that the linebackers will surprise people, but I think it's going to be more because of who is starting at the linebacker position, more so than necessarily how they're going to play and elevate the team. I think they're going to be good linebackers, not superstars, not Pro Bowlers, but I think they're going to be solid linebackers for the NFL season. But I think the starters come either week 1 or I'd say after the bye week are going to surprise quite a few people, because I think there are a few guys that aren't quite being talked about as starters that are going to kind of show up and be the starting duo in Detroit. Now, One Pride 40 says, besides Emrod, none of the backers impress me. Yeah, I mean, I think that Derek Barnes is a very good linebacker. I think Derek Barnes is going to be a full-time starter by the time the actual NFL regular season comes around. I think he's the all-around best linebacker that we have. We don't need great linebackers, just serviceable. And that's another thing that I've mentioned before is, in this kind of era of football, you don't need an elite linebacker. In this era of football, you don't necessarily need, an all-pro linebacker. You don't need a Ray Lewis. You don't need a, even a Bobby Wagner or a Luke Kuechly at this point in the NFL, because linebackers with, the air raid and the passing game and, with wide receivers and quarterbacks just, running their own routes and just playing backyard football, linebackers aren't really as important, right? Safeties are more important. Corners are more important. Pass rushers are more important. And I would argue that linebacker is the least valuable position on the defense right now, in a very similar way that running back is one of the least valuable positions on the offense. Linebacker, I think, is fastly becoming one of the most overrated and least valuable pieces of an NFL defense. Not that they're not important, not that you don't need good linebackers to be successful, but you don't need an all-pro linebacker anymore. You just need somebody that's serviceable and that isn't going to be a liability. And I think the Lions have those guys. Malcolm Rodriguez hasn't played one snap, so how has he impressed you? I mean, just from training camp and things like that, coaches keep talking about how he's excelling, how mentally he's ahead of multiple 30-year players on the roster at this point. I think that's kind of where One Pride 40 is coming at. Quintricia was really against athletes. Explain why we were so slow. That is a good point. They were more worried about scheme fit. They were more worried about, I guess, good character than like athletes. And it definitely made the job very difficult for Lions fans, right? They didn't draft a lot of athletes. Kenny Golladay was slow. Kerry Young was slow. I mean, you name a player on the Quintricia era Detroit Lions, and they were probably not a very good athlete because the Lions just didn't draft athletes. They drafted scheme fits. They drafted technique, which is great, but if you're a good enough coach, you can teach those things. You don't need a technician necessarily when you could get a great athlete that has the upside and you could teach that technique, which is where I really think one of the big downfalls of their regime and just identity was. Addison Marinelli is in the chat, says, how do you think Hutchinson will adjust to being the bone of the defense at Michigan, then coming in as a rookie? I think Aiden Hutchinson will have a huge role early. Obviously, being the number 2 overall pick, he has some pretty high expectations. I think he will start on the defensive line across from Romeo Okwara. And I don't think necessarily he'll be the backbone of the defense, just because very rarely do rookies come in and lead a team like that, right? It's very rare. Even Micah Parsons last year, who had one of the best rookie seasons ever as a defensive player, wasn't a captain. He wasn't a leader in that defense necessarily, because that's just something that comes with time. That's something that comes with being a veteran. But I think he'll slide in. I think he's a player that, one of his big check marks during the draft season was he's a hard worker. He's a guy with a super high motor. And I think those things are going to show up very early in Detroit. And even though he might not be the leader or the backbone of the defense like he was at Michigan, I think he's going to be very, very good. Let's see. If you look at Brad Holmes' draft classes, then you like athletes on this team, because I do. Yeah, that's a big thing too. Like the first draft class that they had was all athletes. I mean, Penei Sewell was a top 5 athlete when it came to RAS score at the tackle position. Levi was an athletic freak. Aleem was an athletic freak. You look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think had like a 7.25, which is above average. Ifeatu Melifonwu was in the high 8s or low 9s, I believe. Like even Jermar Jefferson had, pretty good explosiveness, pretty good breakaway speed, and pretty good burst as a running back. I mean, every single player that they've drafted over the last 2 years, I think maybe with the exception of one, because I don't think Jefferson tested very well, has been a highly ranking RAS score player. And those are the kind of athletes that the Detroit Lions are bringing in. Honestly, safety matters more than linebackers. Yep, I agree with you there. As the Rams, some can't name their linebackers that played in the Super Bowl. Yeah, and that's another thing is just kind of going back to that whole linebacker thing. Like the starting linebackers in the Super Bowl weren't big name guys. They weren't Bobby Wagner. They weren't Luke Kuechly. They weren't Fred Warner. They weren't Darius Leonard. It was, Logan Wilson. It was, I couldn't even tell you the starters for the Rams linebacking core a season ago that started at off-ball linebacker, because they're just less important. Those guys were serviceable. Those guys did their jobs. And those guys, they were good, but they're not all pros. They're not Pro Bowlers. They're not going to get any kind of recognition necessarily. But yeah, I think that, linebacker is just kind of becoming outdated at this point. Well, they drafted a few athletes, Hawk, the O-line, and Amani. I mean, Amani wasn't really that good of an athlete, though. Like, he's a big, long cornerback, but he didn't run very fast. He didn't test super well athletically at the combine. TJ Hawkinson, I'll give you. TJ's a very good athlete. But even on the offensive line, like, Jonah Jackson is a fine athlete, but he's not like some super explosive, out of this world player, right? Taylor Decker, same thing. Like, he's very good at the tackle position, but he's not some freakish athlete like Penei Sewell. They just didn't prioritize athletes very much. And if they did, it was always late round picks versus the first round picks, right? Where, they drafted Jelani Tavai in the second round, who was not an athlete, but was very good technically, was very good fundamentally, but he just wasn't a good athlete, and that really hurt him. He was slow. He didn't move very well, and that's why he, for lack of a better word, busted in the NFL. Amani tested in all greens. Well, I guess I don't remember Amani's RAS score perfectly, but I mean, like, I think he ran like a 4.5, a 4.6 or something like that. Like, I mean, not a poor athlete, but not anything great. Like, Teez Tabor wasn't a good athlete, but they drafted him really early as well. Don't get me started on Jelani Tavai. He was awful. Yeah, Jelani Tavai was not a very good player. I think that the scheme certainly hurt him. Jelani Tavai, going into his rookie season, actually, I think impressed a lot of people because a lot of people had low expectations for him. In his rookie season, he wasn't bad, made a couple big impact plays, forced a big fumble in week 2 of his rookie season, had an interception, didn't play poorly, I wouldn't say, right? He had some ups and downs, as every rookie does, but he didn't play all that bad in his rookie season. But going into year 2, Matt Patricia had him playing at like 230 pounds at the linebacker position, which was heavier than our edge rushers. Like, it didn't make a lot of sense. They had him bulk up as if he was going to be more of an edge rusher, but then had him playing off-ball linebacker in coverage where speed and agility and change of direction are way more important. And that never made a lot of sense to me. I never really understood why they did that because, like I said, if you're playing at the weight of an edge rusher, why are you playing off-ball linebacker? Like, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah, he was playing at 260 when I think Romeo Okwara was 255 that year as the leading sack guy for the Detroit Lions. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me why the whole Matt Patricia era was a little sketchy, to be honest. Like, it just didn't make a lot of sense. They made a lot of really poor decisions. And that's the end of the Matt Patricia era. We're done. We're past it. We're into the Dan Campbell era. And I'll tell you, the Dan Campbell era is much more fun to be in than the Matt Patricia era. But one thing I did want to talk about on this stream, right? Just kind of dumping out some information that's been on my mind, stuff that, I've thought about and wanted to mention, but haven't necessarily thought it was enough information for a whole video. First I want to talk about potential bubble guys that, just throughout mini camp or throughout training camp or OTAs or whatever the case may be, guys that, are being outperformed, guys that are being outshone. Guys that are being outshone by some of the younger players and guys that, might be surprise roster bubbles or guys that might lose their starting spots come the NFL regular season. The first player that I had written down was Tim Boyle. Tim Boyle was coming in this season as almost the guaranteed quarterback 2, was the quarterback 2 all of last year, started 3 games, played in 5 for the Detroit Lions, didn't play particularly well for the Lions at any point in the NFL season, right? Through a game-losing interception in Atlanta, through 2 picks versus Cleveland in a 1-score game. I would say that Tim Boyle was the reason that we lost 2 of those 3 games, if I'm being honest. And David Blau, for a majority of the OTAs, for a majority of mandatory minicamp, has really outshone him, has really outperformed who we thought was going to be QB2. And I think David Blau is going to overtake him. Right now, David Blau, although it's not shown here, is currently ranked as the Lions quarterback 2 and has been taking a large majority of quarterback 2 reps with the Detroit Lions second team offense. And during, competitive team drills, during those, situations where, okay, it's, a minute left in the game, drive 80 yards for a touchdown and win. If you score, you win. If you lose, or if you don't score, you lose. David Blau has been the one impressing in all of those drills over Tim Boyle. Khalif Raymond is another player on the offense that I think isn't really all that safe, even though a lot of people think that he is. Khalif Raymond is somebody that, was a good player for the Lions a season ago, was the primary kick and punt returner for the Detroit Lions, was their kind of primary deep threat, as he was the only player with some real deep speed, but he's not really needed in that role anymore, right? We have DJ Chark, we have Jameson Williams as speedy deep threats, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown emerging as a potential wide receiver 1 option for the Detroit Lions, right? Josh Reynolds showed up late in the season. Quintez Cephas, I'd say, was outplaying Khalif Raymond early in the season when they were both healthy. And now, with the addition of Khalil Pimpleton, the undrafted free agent from Central Michigan, I do think Khalif Raymond, despite being a very recently re-signed player, I do think that he is somebody that is on the chopping block. I do think that he is somebody that may not make it into the top 6 wide receivers on the Detroit Lions this season. And if you go to his contract, I know he just re-signed, but if you were to cut him after June 1st, okay, it's about the same. If you were to cut him after June 1st, yeah, it's $2 million in dead cap. It's not, the greatest, right? You don't want to get rid of $2 million. But at the end of the day, $2 million is $2 million in the NFL. That's hardly anything. If you cut Tim Boyle and, one other veteran depth player, that's your $2 million back, right? It's not going to be detrimental cap-wise to the Detroit Lions. So I think both of those players on offense are, kind of on that chopping block just because they aren't really performing in training camp like some of their other teammates and some of their other peers. Defensively, I don't think this player is necessarily at a risk of being cut, but I do think Alex Anzalone is at severe risk of losing a lot of playing time next season. Alex Anzalone was what we needed him to be. Alex Anzalone was the guy that stepped in, was the leader in Detroit, was the guy that needed to step up and did step up. But now the Lions have some more options at linebacker. Derek Barnes is going into his second year and emerged as a pretty good linebacker a season ago, right? Sean Dion Hamilton is hopefully healthy, which would give them another option. Malcolm Rodriguez is a player I don't think they were expecting to walk away with in the NFL draft, but stole him in the middle of the 6th round. Chris Board has been playing very well at OTAs, and Chris Board has been playing very well at mandatory minicamp and has been starting with the ones for a large majority of these team practices and team competitive drills. And Alex Anzalone is seeming to be that one linebacker that continues to fall behind. He's that one linebacker that, yeah, he's a good leader. He's that linebacker that, yeah, he kind of knows the system better, but he's not the most talented. He's not the best tackler. He's not the best in coverage. He's not the smartest player as far as like IQ and football IQ and reading the field. Like, he's going to be there, and I fully expect him to make the active roster, but I don't expect him to be playing a lot this season other than maybe as a special teams player or as a leader. 1Pride40 says, when do you think Jameson Williams is coming back? Hopefully sooner rather than later. I think a lot of people think by the time the bye week rolls around at week 6, that's when we should expect him to come back. There's a little bit of talk and a little bit of rumor that we might be seeing Jameson Williams by the end of training camp at not by 100%, but, start seeing him running routes. He's been catching some footballs at practices recently, not full contact, not full sprint speed or anything like that, not full cuts, but he's been running, he's been, jogging, he's been catching footballs. It's a slow process, but that is a good step in the right direction. And I think that, anywhere between week 1 and week 6 is when I think we could expect Jameson Williams to be back. But I also think the Lions are going to take it very slow, so it might be closer to that week 6 mark, even if he's ready by, say, week 2. I do think Jeff Okudah is toast. Not high on him neither. I think Jeff Okudah is going to play very well next season. I think Jeff Okudah gets a lot of slack gets a lot of hate because he was a former top 5 pick. He was a number 3 overall pick at the cornerback position at, the peak of the Matt Patricia era. He was supposed to be the Darius Slay replacement. He was supposed to be, the best cornerback from Ohio State. He was supposed to be the guy. And Matt Patricia did him no favors in his rookie year. And that's what I think really hurt him as a rookie. And then right when he started to find his stride and right when he started to play better under Aubrey Pleasant, because he did play better in that week 1 matchup, he was a good cornerback. He had good coverage, good tight coverage on every single ball that was thrown his way. He had good coverage. He was a better player. It was very clear he understood routes better. It was very clear that he was a little bit better with his hips and with his feet and with his technique. He just happened to get hurt and tear his Achilles 48 snaps into the NFL season. And if he can come back and the Achilles doesn't bother him, I think Jeff Okudah will take massive strides in year 3 because he took a massive jump in year 2. His season just ended too quickly for anybody to really notice or to catch it. But with everything around Goff, he should play better. J-Mo, Chark, Amon-Ra, Hawk. Yeah. And I mean, if you want to add on to that, Swift is a really good receiving weapon. They drafted James Mitchell to be a tight end weapon for him. They just got Devin Funchess, a wide receiver from Michigan that, is been a pretty solid weapon throughout the NFL when he's been healthy. I think Jared Goff has everything that he needs to succeed this season. It's nice to know we have wide receivers that can get open. Health is the only stat that counts. Goff has proven to be a better talent. He is better. Better than who? I don't quite know who you are referring to, but I mean, Goff has been a very stable quarterback for a while in the NFL. Khalif might be a goner. So is Benson. I think Benson's a goner. I think Khalif Raymond is also not going to make the roster. Motor City Sports says, yo, it's been a while. I've seen a video. I got to start watching more. So hyped for the season. Yeah, me too. I am extremely, extremely excited for the NFL season. It's say 12 people in the chat, but I only see a few. Lol, what's going on here? I don't know. Some people just like to watch and not comment. So sometimes that's just how it is. Patricia destroyed a good team. Yeah, Patricia definitely tore down some things that should not have been taken down. We would need a lot further now if Patricia wasn't our coach. Yeah, he absolutely did set us back quite often in his regime. If you can perform with that, he got to go. Yeah. I mean, that team, a lot of people forget the Lions were a playoff team when Matt Patricia came to town. They were a 9-7 team, made the playoffs 2 of the last 4 years before Matt Patricia took over, and then they never made the playoffs again. And now they're one of the bottom 10 teams in the NFL again, where they were a perennial playoff team just 4 years ago. And I think that's what a lot of people forget is, everybody goes, oh, it's the Lions. They've never been good. They haven't been good in so long. Jim Caldwell had this team at a playoff competitor. This team was in playoff contention for 4 straight seasons under Jim Caldwell. And I think Bob Quinn just destroyed everything because he wanted his guy. How many skills do you think Matt Patricia broke? Over under of 3? Probably an over on that. Goff is proven to be better with better talent as well. Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. When he's given proper talent, when he's given proper scheme around him, Jared Goff is more than a serviceable quarterback in the NFL. I think we carry 6 wide receivers: J-Mo, Chark, Amon-Ra, Reynolds, Cephas, Pimpleton. I think, that's what I think the roster is going to look like too. I think they carry 6 wide receivers like they did a year ago. I think Jameson Williams sits out early, which they might even put him on the PUP list. They might even put him on the physically unable to perform list for the first couple of weeks until the bye, which would, I think, allow them to add or even keep Raymond for those first couple of weeks. But I think by the time J-Mo gets back, I think that is going to be the 6 wide receivers that you see on the Detroit Lions roster going into, the Chicago game, the Dallas game, the Miami game, things like that. Swift was third in the league in yards after a catch until he got hurt last season behind Samuel and Kupp. Yeah, DeAndre Swift is a very, very good player. I mean, he took 2 massive screen passes to the house all by himself last season against the Niners and against the Rams. He's a really good wide receiver. He's a really good running back. He's just a very dynamic weapon in the NFL this season. Do I have a schedule prediction? I do have a schedule prediction. Like I mentioned earlier, me and Payout Time, we did do a stream yesterday going game by game over the Detroit Lions schedule. I had the Detroit Lions coming out at 9-8. I think more likely it's going to be closer to 8-9 or 7-10. But for me, their ceiling is 10 wins and their floor is 6 wins. I think they'll be somewhere in between, probably closer to 7 or 8 wins. But, like Dr. Paparoni said at the bottom here, the 6 is the lowest that I could see. The Lions go 2-4 in the division last year. They got better. The division as a whole, the Bears, the Packers, the Vikings, I think all took a step back this season while the Lions took multiple steps forward. I think 3-3 in the division as the bare minimum that we should expect out of this Detroit Lions team. And then, outside of that, you have 3 wins already. If you can't win 3 games out of the Giants, the Jets, the Panthers, and the Jaguars, on top of, I'd say even the Seattle Seahawks and the Washington football team, if you can't win 3 out of those 6 games, I think you're very much underachieving for your football team and for the talent that your football team has. And then, of course, you're going to look at, you'll probably upset one of the other teams, right? You'll probably upset one of Dallas, Philadelphia, Miami. Maybe you'll upset Green Bay and go 4-2 in the division, right? I think realistically, 6 wins should be the bare minimum. I think that is the bare minimum. Is 8 wins enough for a wild card? I doubt it. Hot take: Hutch wins Rookie of the Year. Jameis wins Offensive Rookie of the Year. Dan Campbell wins Head Coach of the Year. I don't think that's quite going to happen. I don't think Jameson Williams is going to play enough in order to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. But Hutchinson, I think, could definitely win. I think Hutchinson will get the opportunity, and I think is in a good enough situation to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. I keep saying Matt Campbell because I'm reading the M first in MCDC. Dan Campbell, I think, can win Coach of the Year, but the Lions would have to make the playoffs for that to happen. I think if the Lions finish, 9-8 and sneak into a wild card spot, or better yet, if they, somehow go on some magical run like the Bengals did a season ago, and they somehow, win the North and, secure a home field advantage for a wild card game, I think that would easily win Dan Campbell Coach of the Year. I don't think it's likely to happen, but I think that that's the road that you're looking at if you are going to win the head coach. If the Lions win 5 games or less, should we make a head coaching change? I don't think so. Dan Campbell I think would very much underperform. And I think 5 wins or less would put him on the hot seat. I think, 5 wins after 3-3-1 season, after your team got significantly better on every level, I think, 5 wins would be severely underperforming, but I don't think they would fire him. I think that, they would give him 1 more year, but 5 wins would definitely put him on the hot seat. I think would probably be taking, into account that maybe this isn't the guy, but I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't. I think this coaching staff and I think this roster is too good to win just 5 games. Let's see. Well, the NFC is pretty weak. The NFC is not the powerhouse conference that it once was. The NFC conference is in a weaker position right now than they were. You go to, I don't want the American Football Conference. Why is it just giving me the American? Unless I didn't scroll down far enough. Oh, here we go. Yeah. I mean, realistically, the NFC is not the powerhouse that it used to be, right? You look at the AFC and you can say, okay, how many teams realistically are going to push for the playoffs in January? Tennessee, Tennessee, Kansas City, Buffalo, Cincinnati, Vegas, New England. I would say the Colts are going to push. I'd say Miami can make a push. The Browns, if they have Deshaun Watson. The Ravens are a playoff contender. And I would say the Broncos are also a playoff contender. I think there's only 3 teams in the AFC right now that don't have playoff aspirations. And that would be the Jets, the Texans, and the Jaguars. Right? Every other team, Broncos, Ravens, Browns, Chargers, Dolphins, Colts, maybe not the Steelers, but I think the Steelers will be closer to 6 to 7 wins. The Patriots, the Raiders, the Bengals, the Bills, everybody except for maybe 4 teams is vying and is fighting for a playoff spot in the AFC, whereas you go over to the NFC, yeah, you have the Packers, you have the Bucks, you have the Cowboys, you have the Rams, you have the Cardinals, the Eagles, the 49ers, and the Saints. But I think outside of that, and maybe the Vikings, but outside of that, right, you have the football team who the Lions do play, Seattle, who the Lions play, the Bears, who the Lions play, the Panthers, and the Giants, who they both play as well. The Lions are playing most of the bottom teams in the NFC right now. And, whereas there's 4 to 5 teams in the AFC that aren't really looking for playoffs, I would say realistically the football team, Seattle, Atlanta, Chicago, Carolina, New York, and I would say even Detroit is right now not ready to compete in the playoffs. So the NFC is a weaker conference. And with 7 seeds, right, if the Packers, the Bucks, the Cowboys, the Rams, the Cardinals, the Niners, and the Eagles all make it, right, I'd say there's only 1 or 2 other teams really pushing for that wild card spot. And if the Lions can go on a run, if the Lions can rip off 9, even 8 to 9 wins, that's going to put them in wild card contention. It might not put them in the wild card. It might not get them into the postseason, but it's going to put them pretty darn close. Whereas in the AFC, that might not happen. The Saints had both Rookie of the Year. Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but I don't think that the Lions are in a position where that's going to happen. The AFC will be good for a long time because all the good QBs are on that side. I mean, I would say all the good QBs are on that side. Dak Prescott's good. Matthew Stafford's good. Aaron Rodgers is good. But I think there's more young, talented quarterbacks on that side. I will give you that argument. The NFC is weak. Bucks, Rams are going to get the ring. They're a weaker conference from top to bottom for sure. Luke G is in the building. He says the Lions better be ready to compete in the playoffs. I don't think that they are. I really don't think that they are. I think they're good enough to, go 4-2 in a division. I think they're good enough to, maybe fight for a wild card spot, but I don't think they're on the level where they're ready to truly compete and contend in the NFC playoff. I don't think they're quite on par with the Bucks or the Rams or even the Cardinals at this point, even though they beat the Cardinals a season ago. I don't think they're ready to go on a run in the playoffs. I don't think they're quite ready to compete. I think they're ready to compete for the playoffs, but not so much ready to compete in the playoffs just as of yet. But with that being the case, the one other thing that I did want to take a look at as I pull my schedule back over here, I do want to mention 2 UDFAs that are continuing to stand out. 2 undrafted rookie free agents from this roster that are continuing to make plays in OTAs and that are continuing to impress a lot of coaches. Those players being Khalil Pimpleton, the undrafted free agent that we mentioned out of Central Michigan, is a player that has been really, really good. I mean, he's been running very good routes. He's been creating a lot of separation on the second string secondary. Try saying that 5 times fast. He's just been creating a lot of separation. He's been showing good routes. He's been showing good burst, right? He's somebody that flew under the radar as not a very highly draftable wide receiver, right? A wide receiver that stands at 5'9" and hasn't had 1,000 yards in his career at Central Michigan is not somebody that is going to be super high on a lot of people's draft boards, but he does run good routes. He does create separation, and he's been the standout rookie wide receiver at minicamp, right? Obviously, Jameson Williams isn't running routes, but Khalil Pimpleton has been that guy at training camp. He's been the third down converter. He's been the big play machine. He's been that guy that David Blau continues to get the football to, and him and David Blau continue to just make play after play after play. The other player that is also continuing to make a big impact is Demetrius Taylor, the undrafted rookie defensive tackle from Appalachian State. And he is, again, somebody that I, made a video about, somebody that I talked about, a guy that kind of like Khalil Pimpleton is slightly undersized, somebody that is, slightly, not desirable, I would say, from a measurement perspective, but statistically at Appalachian State, he was very good. He rushes the passer with very good leverage. He is somebody that continues to impress despite what his size and measurables might say. And especially with the retirement of John Penisini, I think that if the Lions are to go into the season with 5 defensive tackles, being Alim McNeill, Michael Brockers, Levi Onwuzurike, Demetrius Taylor, and either Jayshon Cornell or John Kaminsky at this point, I think that Demetrius Taylor has maybe the best path to making the starting 53 by the time the preseason rolls around. One prep versus the AFC is Mahomes, Burrow, Herbert, Allen, Jackson, Wilson, and Carr. That is very, very true. Like I said, I think they have better young quarterbacks. I think they are the better conference going forward right now. But, at the same time, you go through the NFC conference and you're going to say how many teams are going to be looking for a new young quarterback pretty soon. The Lions, the Giants, maybe the Panthers. I think Justin Fields has potential to be very good. The Seahawks, the football team, the Vikings, the Saints potentially, right? There's a lot of the NFC is kind of at that stage where their best players are the old veterans, right? Their best players are back-to-back MVP Aaron Rodgers. Their best players are the GOAT of Tom Brady. And the NFC is kind of the older division. They're the more proven division at this point, and they are the division that just won the Super Bowl. But I would say, as far as you're talking young stars and you're talking football and you're talking, big plays and fantasy and all that, I think the AFC is a better conference, and I think they have a brighter future right now. But the NFC has some pretty good players as well. Are you still going into sports media? Yep, I am. I am studying at Adrian College for my Bachelor's of Science in Broadcasting and Multimedia, as well as my associate's degree in business. So, yeah. Yep, that is my major, and that is what I'm working towards right now. Carr might have a career year this year, definitely underrated. I think Derek Carr is underrated a little bit. I think that he's not up there with, the Herberts, the Allens, the Jacksons, or the Mahomes of the world, but I do think he's a good quarterback. I think he's a very good leader. I think he's a very underrated quarterback, somebody that is very rarely talked about as a top 10 guy, but I think is closer to 10 than 15. I think you're right. I think Derek Carr is a very good quarterback. I would be surprised if any undrafted free agent made the 53. I wouldn't be at all, because every single year undrafted free agents make a roster. They did last year. They did under Patricia. They did under Caldwell. Every team in the NFL signs undrafted free agents to make a roster. And the Lions are a roster that they could use some help, right? They could use Khalil Pimpleton, especially after the retirement of John Penisini. They could use Demetrius Taylor. So I don't think it's going to be a ton. I don't think the UDFA running back is. I don't think that Derek Dees Jr. necessarily will make the roster. But I bet at least 2 will. I bet at least 2 undrafted free agents will make this roster. NFC only has Stafford and Rodgers, and Tom Brady's pretty good too. I would say. I'd say Tom Brady's pretty good. I'd say Dak Prescott's borderline top 10. I'd say that Kyler Murray borderline top 10, if not definitely top 15 wide receiver. So I mean they got some players, right? I'd say Aaron Rodgers certainly top 5. Tom Brady, certainly top 10. Dak Prescott, 10 to 15. Matt Stafford, certainly top 10. Kyler Murray, again, top 15. So they got 6 quarterbacks in there, 6 quarterbacks in the top 10 to 15 range. It's not bad. It's not bad. But I will give you that the AFC right now is a stronger conference top to bottom. I will give you that. But the NFC certainly has more players than just Stafford and Rodgers. They got Brady. They got they got good quarterbacks. They got some good quarterbacks as well. But, kind of building off some of the roster that the Lions have, I do think that, kind of just going off of, the fact that some UDFAs are going to make the roster, I think there's going to be a lot of competition on this roster. I think that's what Dan Campbell likes to preach, and he means it. Dan Campbell is not somebody that's just going to hand you a starting spot in the NFL. And I think, you look top to bottom, I don't know if you can look at a positional group outside the offensive line that doesn't have real competition for playing time, right? I'd say quarterback, yeah, Jared Goff is the starter, but Tim Boyle and David Blau are fighting it out for quarterback too right now, and David Blau is winning that competition, right? You go look at running back, Craig Reynolds had 200 yards a season ago. Jermar Jefferson is very good. Jermar Jefferson is a player that, had a big break-off run in Week 7 versus the Pittsburgh Steelers and got hurt. He is somebody that's been playing hurt his entire NFL career during his rookie season, but he has a lot of burst. He has really good contact balance, and if he can go into the season healthy, he is very much in contention for running back 3. You look at wide receiver, obviously the Pimpleton over Raymond. You're talking, who's going to start with Jameson Williams out? Is it going to be Reynolds? Is it going to be Cephas? Is it going to be St. Brown on the boundary and, somebody else in the slot? That obviously has a ton of competition. You look at tight end, Brock Wright right now is the tight end 2, but you drafted James Mitchell and you signed Devin Funchess in recent days. Obviously Jason Kabinda is the fullback. That guy is pretty secure. The offensive line is pretty solid, even though I think Abini Aziz and Matt Nelson are pretty close. I think they are guys that are going to fight out for number 2, or Abini Aziz and Dan Skipper are going to fight out for that last spot. You go to the defense, right? I'd say everybody's fighting for that defensive line role, right? You have Levi, Aleem, Michael, all fighting for that starting defensive tackle. Romeo and Charles and Aiden Hutchinson and Josh Pascal are all fighting for that edge rusher position. Linebacker is a complete dogfight with, Derek Barnes, Anzalone, Board, Malcolm Rodriguez, Jared Davis, Julian Okwara. They're all fighting for starting linebacker spots when only 3 of them are going to play, right? On the secondary, Amani Oruwariye is coming off a huge season, but Jeff Okudah is coming back from an Achilles injury. How is he going to look? Is he going to continue to impress in the NFL? Or is he going to, finally start playing like the 3rd overall pick that we thought he would be? If not, who takes over? Is it Jerry Jacobs, who played very well a season ago? Is it Mike Hughes, who started on the Chiefs a season ago? Is it, do you move Iffy back to corner? There's just a lot of storylines and a ton of competition on the Lions roster right now. And there's not really a position that's safe for anybody at this point, I don't think. Do you think we draft a quarterback this year? I think it really depends on how Jared Goff plays this year. I think if Jared Goff plays, really well, if he does have the best year of his career, I think you could be talking about somebody going as far as, number whatever overall to the Detroit Lions. But I do think this quarterback class is pretty good, right? This quarterback class has some very talented players. And, obviously you have your Bryce Young at the top. You have your CJ Stroud at the top. But even like Tyler Van Dyke is a good pocket passer. Tanner McKee. I haven't really watched a lot of Tanner McKee, but Will Levis is getting a lot of hype. You obviously have DJ Uiagalelei, who's a pretty good player at Clemson with the right weapons around him. Spencer Rattler has a ton of talent. Malik Cunningham has a ton of talent. Anthony Richardson from Florida, I think, has some upside. You're talking about, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Tyler Van Dyke, Will Levis, DJ Uiagalelei, 5 quarterbacks potentially being first-round picks. And with good seasons, I think Malik Cunningham could sneak in there. I think DJ Uiagalelei or Spencer Rattler could both sneak into the first round if they really have good seasons. This isn't really the best one that I have seen. I'm trying to find the one that I always use. But there's a ton of really, really good quarterbacks. This is the one that I like to use. Select all and we'll just start. Right, you're looking at the quarterback position. CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis, Tyler Van Dyke, Anthony Richardson, Grayson McCall is a good player at this point. KJ Jefferson, maybe Hendon Hooker in the middle of day 2. JT Daniels is somebody that I still like a lot. Jaden Daniels is somebody that I like going into LSU. Malik Cunningham is somebody that is a very good quarterback. I am pretty high on Tua Tagovailoa, and Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State. There's a ton of really, really talented quarterbacks in this year's class, and I think that one of them will end up being a Detroit Lion. I just saw that Michael Penix Jr. went to Washington from Indiana. But, even, Sean Clifford and Tanner Morgan are decent backup options if you want to invest at backup quarterback. I do think the Lions will address quarterback next season. And I think, outside of Jared Goff putting up MVP numbers, I do think that quarterback is in the cards for the Detroit Lions' future. Jared Goff is by no means a liability at quarterback, but he's not going to win you a Super Bowl. He's by no means bad, but he's not great. He's under contract till 2024. This is the only year that you really have to keep Jared Goff. So either, Jared Goff plays good enough where you're like, okay, you can play through 2023. This young guy can sit. This young guy can learn under the coaching staff for a little bit and then be the starter in 2024. Or if Jared Goff really, just plays abysmal this season and, you end up with another top 5 pick, you're standing there like, all right, Bryce Young, future guy, CJ Stroud, great prospect, even, Will Levis, really good guy. I'm not the biggest fan of Levis, but even, Levis, okay, Tyler Van Dyke, okay, yeah, you move on with your quarterback and you cut Jared Goff. But I think, outside of Jared Goff playing at an MVP level, I think quarterback is in the cards for Detroit next year. Hope to see you on TV someday, giving the Lions a fair shake in the media. Yeah, well, that is the goal. What round would you draft a QB in is the question. I mean, right now it's really early to tell, right? Obviously, preseason, before the college football season, you have, your first rounders of Stroud and Young and Levis and Van Dyke and Richardson, all graded as first round picks at this point. But, Grayson McCall, I think with a really good year could potentially jump into first round talk. I think, Spencer Rattler, somebody that, 2 years ago at this point was projected to be the number 1 overall pick in 2022. DJ Uiagalelei, kind of had a down year with Clemson, but didn't really have a ton of weapons to work with, right? Didn't have ETN, didn't have T. Higgins, didn't have a whole lot of players, and, led them to 10-3. We all saw what he did when he did have weapons in 2020, right? When he was filling in for Trevor Lawrence against Notre Dame, right? He put up, I think, 400 passing yards and like 3 or 4 passing touchdowns. And yeah, they lost that game, but by no means was that DJ Uiagalelei's fault, right? He has a good season. He could jump into the first round conversation. KJ Jefferson is somebody that I think is an underrated quarterback in the SEC. Hendon Hooker, I think we could see as a late day 1, early day 2 selection. JT Daniels, I think is a mid day 2 prospect that you could develop that has some good passing ability. It really depends on who's there on the board. It really depends how many quarterbacks are left, how many quarterbacks that you like. But, come next offseason, I think we're going to talk about quite a few of them. I think Malcolm Rodriguez starts at middle linebacker. I also think Malcolm Rodriguez starts at middle linebacker. Pascal is a steal potentially, as do some of our picks this year. Yeah, linebacker, wide receiver competitions are heating up. Who is Will Levis? Everybody keeps talking about their CJ, their Bryce for like 6 months now. I'm hearing his name. He is the quarterback for Kentucky. He's a controversial player, I would say. He's somebody that certainly, I think, has some talent to go to the NFL, but I don't think necessarily is, in my opinion, I don't think he is some great NFL quarterback prospect. I really don't. And it's not so much like, oh, it's a Kentucky thing. It's a run first school. It's a, whatever. You can get great quarterbacks from small schools that didn't win anything. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. Both came from smaller schools that never competed for a national championship. You don't need to go to Bama or Ohio State to be a good NFL quarterback. But from what I've seen, the small bit that I've watched of Will Levis, I'm not a huge fan. I would much rather CJ Stroud. I would much rather Bryce Young. I would much rather, I won't say about Tyler Van Dyke, Anthony Richardson, but I've watched quite a bit of Hendon Hooker. I've watched quite a bit of DJ Uiagalelei. I like both of them as potential first-round picks, especially with maybe that Rams pick later in the first round. I think it's certainly possible. I do think the Browns got smoked in the Baker Mayfield trade. I don't think they had much option. Everybody knew Baker wasn't going to play. I'm almost surprised that the Panthers had to give away that much, right? I mean, at this point, they were essentially ready to cut Baker Mayfield. I'm surprised that they got anything at all, to be totally honest. I'm surprised they got more than a 7th-round pick for Baker. Not because Baker's not good enough for, 5th-round pick. I would even, talent-wise, I might even consider a 4th or a 3rd-round pick for Baker Mayfield because he's a good quarterback. He's a very good quarterback. But the Browns, I mean, they are handling this situation incredibly poorly. I mean, you basically give away your entire future for a quarterback that may not ever play again. And in turn, you frustrate the starting quarterback that took you to and won a playoff game for the first time since before the Lions won their last playoff game. And now you have to trade that guy away for very little compensation in return, right? Former first overall pick traded for a 5th-round pick, not because of the talent or play, because of the really, really poor situation that the Browns put themselves in. And now the Browns might go into the NFL season with Jacoby Brissett as their starting quarterback because Deshaun Watson, I'll tell you right now, has a very low probability of playing in week 1. Baker Mayfield is not there anymore. Jacoby Brissett is going to have to run the offense for likely half of the season, if not more. And don't get me wrong, the Browns are a good enough team. They are a well enough constructed team that they will win some football games, even with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. But their situation is not as glamorous as it might seem with Deshaun Watson. But that is just my opinion. Browns might go back to the dumpster soon. I don't know about the dumpster because I think they are a talented football team. Defensively, Myles Garrett is top edge rusher in the NFL. They got good corners. They got good safety play. They are a good team. They have Nick Chubb. They have a good offensive line. They have, some decent weapons. Like they are a good football team. They are a well-constructed football team. And I think their coaching staff is not bad. And I do not think their coaching staff is a liability. But if this Deshaun Watson trade doesn't work out, if Deshaun Watson doesn't play a snap for Cleveland, this will go down as the worst trade in NFL history. And I think even right now, it's one of the sketchier trades in NFL history. The Browns really destroyed their win now window, especially with an unnecessary Watson. Yeah. And, I get that, Watson is a very good quarterback. I'm totally willing to accept that, maybe they didn't think Baker was their guy. Maybe they didn't think Baker was the guy that was going to take them to the Super Bowl, even though they invested a 1st-round pick in him, or 1st overall pick in him even. That's fine. But if you're looking at even quarterbacks that were on the move this offseason, Russell Wilson is a better quarterback than Deshaun Watson. I think he's obviously more experienced. He has won a Super Bowl. He is, and I think it would have taken less than 3 first-round picks to acquire Russell Wilson from the Seattle Seahawks. You look at who else moved this offseason? Matt Ryan for a 3rd-round pick. You give a 3rd-round pick to Atlanta, and Matt Ryan is a better quarterback, I think, than Baker Mayfield, and he doesn't have off-the-field issues. You look at, I feel like there was one other big trade this offseason that really put some team into playoff contention. I don't know. I'm sure it will come to me. But, there were multiple former MVPs, multiple former time Super Bowl winners, multiple quarterbacks that were veteran, that had no off the field issues, that were ready for a new system, that were ready for a new place to go, that would have taken significantly less financial deficit than what the Browns gave up for Deshaun Watson. I mean, they gave up 3 first-round picks and some more. Like, yeah, I understand it's a win now window. I understand Deshaun Watson might give you the biggest upside for the longest amount of time, but you gave up 3 first-round picks and $230 million guaranteed dollars to a player that may not ever play again. And from what I've been hearing, it sounds like Deshaun Watson might play for the Browns. It sounds like Deshaun Watson might only get a 6 to 8 game suspension, which I think is far less than what he should be getting. I think he should get at least a year out of the NFL, if not suspended indefinitely forever. But, from what it sounds like Deshaun Watson is going to play in the NFL. And it sounds like he's going to play at some point this season. But if he's not the guy that the Texans had, if he's not the same player after taking 2 seasons off, if he's not the Deshaun Watson that we saw at the Houston Texans, the Browns might have made the worst decision in all of pro football. Now, One Pride 40 says, he says Matt Ryan should have gone for more. I agree. I think the Matt Ryan trade was extremely underrated, to be totally honest. I think that, Matt Ryan is still a very good quarterback. I don't exactly know what statistics look like. Pro Football Reference, the most goated website on the internet. But, you look at Matty Ice, 7-10 record, which admittedly isn't a great record. No, okay, I don't want ads. Okay. Well, better? Okay. Yeah. So you look at Matt Ryan, right? These are Matt Ryan's statistics. He is a perennial 4,000-yard passer, right? Even some years getting close to 5,000 yards, like in 2016, right? The last couple of years, not as good, right? I mean, even back to 2020, 4,500 yards, 26-11. It's not bad, right? Last year, lost Calvin Ridley very early in the season. New head coach, new offensive system. I'll give him a little bit of a break because, it wasn't his best year, but he had a lot working against him. But even last year, in a pretty poor system with very few weapons to work with and a rookie head coach at the helm, Matt Ryan led his team to a 7-10 record, had a 67% completion percentage, which is above league average, right around 4,000 passing yards, 20 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. You don't think with the Colts, with better receiving options, a better offensive line, and a significantly better run game, that Matt Ryan's going to return to that 4,500 yards, right? You don't think with the Cleveland Browns with Nick Chubb and that offensive line, and I would argue better weapons, right? I would say if you compare the Falcons' weapons, right, maybe that he doesn't have Kyle Pitts, but, the Browns aren't the worst weapons in the NFL, right? You can certainly work with that if you're Matt Ryan. You give him a better line, a better run game, a better run support, a better, pass protection. You give him even, I'd say, similar weapons to what he had at Atlanta last season, but you give him a better defense. You give him, X, Y, and Z. If Matt Ryan can carry the Falcons to 7-10, Matt Ryan can certainly take the Browns to the playoffs. He's going to do it with the Colts this season. He's going to take the Colts, I think, pretty far into the playoffs. And you could have gotten him for a second round pick. I'm so glad he was out. GM, good God, got robbed with the Julio trade. Then that, yeah, Matt Ryan had a very, very bad year last season. Not necessarily even like he played bad, like his number one guy in Julio Jones got traded away. Calvin Ridley decided within a couple weeks of the NFL season that he didn't want to play football anymore, at least for the remainder of that season. You lost your top 2 wide receivers, and your best receiving threat was a rookie tight end with a subpar offensive line, with a subpar receiving core, and a below average defense in the NFL. Matt Ryan took the Atlanta Falcons to 7-10. I mean, for a second round pick, I would have picked up Matt Ryan and I would have put Jared Goff on the bench. Matt Ryan's a very good quarterback still, a very, very good quarterback still. And I think that, Matt Ryan's going to succeed a lot this season. If we had Fournette, we wouldn't have the fleece god like we are in Brad Holmes. Yeah, Brad Holmes is pretty good at making some of these trades. I feel almost like maybe Brad Holmes isn't done trading. Like, it seems like last offseason he made a huge trade, and I feel like I'm just waiting this offseason to wake up one day and be like, oh, hey, the Lions traded for like Lamar Jackson, or hey, the Detroit Lions traded for, X, Y, and Z on the defensive side of the football, right? Like, it just seems like Brad Holmes could just make a blockbuster trade at any minute. And I mean, I think he won the Rams trade. I think he won the Vikings trade this season. I would even argue he won the other Rams trade for Michael Brockers for just a conditional 7th round pick. Brad Holmes doesn't really miss. And the only real bad trade that I'd say that he made was Trinity Benson. But first off, Trinity Benson has a whole preseason to prove himself this year. So until that happens, until he's officially cut, I won't bad talk the trade. And secondly, Brad Holmes with the conditional picks essentially just gave away nothing. He essentially just got back all of those trade assets that they gave away for Trinity Benson, and they essentially just picked him up for free. Like, I know like a 6th round pick or whatever we did to give away for Benson could have turned into something, but realistically, like, they got those picks back in more in compensatory picks, and I mean, that trade was essentially free. And who really cares now? Because he just fleeced the Vikings for Jameson Williams. So I think Brad Holmes is an extremely good football mind, and I think he must be a pretty good people person. So because he continues to work a lot of really good trades that work out in the Lions' favor. So, but with all that being said, I think that's where we're going to call it quits for today. I did the live stream yesterday and the live stream today. My voice and my throat is starting to hurt a little bit, so I'm going to go drink some more water and try to get that fixed up. But thank you all so very much for coming out to the stream. Again, I wanted to just talk some Lions football. I wanted to just come out here, talk with some of you guys, talk with One Pride 40, talk with Luke G, talk with, Dr. Paparoni and, Johnny's in the chat and Joseph. All of these guys, right? All of you guys that show up every single time we live stream and have a really good time. Pretty good numbers for a Thursday afternoon. I think we hit 20 to 25 people, which was really fun. A lot of people in the building, a lot of people in the stream coming in and out. Lots of fun. I had a ton of fun streaming, and I'm really going to try to get back to doing it more weekly or some maybe bi-weekly. But I want to do it more because I have a lot of fun doing it, and I had a lot of fun today. So all that being said, drawn out conclusion aside, that is all for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below any Lions takes that you have, any videos that you guys want to see, anything that you want to see on the channel in general, and I will do my best to make that happen. With all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.